Hello, this is Cary Valentine, and I'm with you. I'm your instructor for BBL 473, Project Leadership at the Baker University School of Professional and Graduate Studies. And I know you've started reading in our textbook here, Leading Project Teams by Cobb. And you've read quite a bit of stuff thus far in this fast-moving class. But I want to try to put this all together and kind of keep you progressing from where you were last week in our first forum. And show you how that kind of merges into this second forum we're going to do in the coming week, what we're going to discuss. Again, this class is about project management. More specifically, it's about project leadership and things that you have to do, certain skills you have to develop based upon the constraints and the objectives and purposes for having project management offices. And but we got to get even more specific into the nuances of leading a project management team, not just being a leader in a general sense, but or just talking about project management. We have to kind of blend that together and get into more of a dialogue about how to lead appropriately in these project teams. So I'm going to bounce ahead. Chapter 5 is about managing project risk, and I want to kind of show you how that all kind of merges together with what we've discussed thus far. Okay, so let's move into that. Let's first of all talk about some of the risks that we have when we set up a project management office, and we're trying to figure this stuff out. Page 92 talks about organizational risk, and some of those translate into what type of organizational support can we either expect or not expect, or what kind of challenges will we have there. Certain risks that we have to somehow anticipate and be able to do something about with a contingency plan. To start with, we might have a lot of people will just wonder after we start doing all these Gantt charts and work breakdown structures and PERT technique type analysis that you've read about in the earlier chapters in the book. People, all the time in the meetings that will go into this, a lot of people wonder, well, in the end, what are we really going to solve? What is the real thesis? I mean, do we even really know what that is? Is it achievable? All of those different things cause people to kind of maybe second guess if it's really worth all the hassle that it seems to be at the early stages. So you can expect some of that coming down the pipe. Now, next, the host organization. Remember, a project management office is actually a structure that's kind of set apart of the larger organizational hierarchical structure. And it's done that way kind of on purpose because a lot of times the objective of a project management office is to actually solve a problem that the traditional hierarchy cannot solve. And it doesn't necessarily say anything bad about the organization itself. It just means that maybe a different hierarchical structure is necessary to solve a certain problem. But still, that being the case, a lot of people within the host organization, individuals that you're going to have to work with to get the project deliverables out there and done, are going to be the people you need to have as allies. You're going to have to work with you. Well, what if they see what you're doing to be some sort of a threat to them in some way? Wow, that can shut down people's likelihood of cooperation really quick. So that's something we have to figure out and think about when we're discussing organizational risk. And to get more specific about that hassle thing I talked about in the first bullet point, we really are going to get into this conversation deeper and deeper about how can we finance or what we call quantifiably, which is like numerically or some sort of use of intervals, things we can measure. How can we rationalize creating this project management office in the first place? When we probably can't even really define the capacity of benefit that it might provide. Or what those benefits might be. That's what happens when you're going into unfamiliar territory and you're being a pioneer. You don't know these different things for sure, but you have to give some sort of a forecast of what you think you might be able to achieve or not achieve in order to get things started. So it's that chicken before the egg kind of conundrum that project leaders have to deal with. So that's organizational risk. Let's move on to what we call deliverable risk. If you remember deliverables from the first few chapters, those are things that are like specific products or services that tend to kind of come out of a project as we're going along. I sometimes liken them to baby steps. If you're thinking of a baby, he's learning to walk. At the beginning, they're going to probably kind of stumble a little bit, sort of pull up to furniture maybe, and walk along. They might have a little walker thing there that they they use or some sort of another instrument. But in the end, they're not probably going to run and jump like, they're a track star. I mean, it's, if you get that, that baby should be on an E-Trade commercial or something, because that is Wonder Baby. And if you've had that in your life, great, But for the most part, we see baby steps, and these are these smaller deliverables, or what's also referred to as interim deliverables, which are these small little victories we try to have to get to the big stuff, to get to the bigger deliverables, the bigger outcomes that we're trying to accomplish. Well, a lot of times those little deliverables, just like that baby, may not be walking at the same rate or be able to advance in their walking skills at, say, the same rate as other kids their age. Just the case is also with project leadership and project management offices. Often those deliverables are just not what people expected. And that starts to discourage them, and they start to question whether or not the project is worthwhile in midstream. That's scary. So something to think about. So in one way, we want to analyze what we're doing and try to give some sort of a good forecastable prediction of somewhat of what we might be able to accomplish. But is that going to happen? How is it going to happen? And are people going to hang in there with us as we're trying to stumble through this project and try to find a solution? So big issue there. Another deliverable type of risk is what we're trying to accomplish, or the problem we're trying to solve. Is it technically feasible to do so? Who can know that for certain? If you're trying to go into territory that no one else has been in, well, yeah, it's going to be kind of hard to know if there's a chance that things are going to be, there's going to be some unexpected things pop up, and technical feasibility is a big issue these days in this big technical world. And so that's often a risk. Even if you don't work in software engineering, technical feasibility will be something you'll discuss a lot about as time goes by. So that's a big one too. And to get even more in depth about that, if we're diving into a problem that no one else in the past has been able to either encapsulate effectively, or they're willing to put the effort into solving, there's going to be some unexpected hurdles. So again, it's a pioneer type thing. This may sound a little redundant compared to the others, but that's what you're going to often have to encounter when you're having dialogue about project management offices. You're going to see a lot of redundancy. You're going to see a lot of that kind of going on, and you're going to have to figure out ways to pull that all together and to be very creative in how you can solve these problems. So that's a specific challenge for a leader that I want to make sure we know about. Also, we have, of course, those external risks. These are risks that tend to be outside of the organization. We might have client stakeholder risk if we're serving clients outside the organization, or we might refer to that as our customer base or whatever. Again, we're going down an unfamiliar road or trail, and so there can be some unpredictable exchanges or confrontations, maybe even. And when we're trying to benefit everything for all the people involved, all the stakeholders from all angles. And so that's an external risk you need to be aware of. Also, we might have a problem with vendors and suppliers. If you're trying to determine how a problem can be solved, and you have vendors or suppliers that might be the problem somehow in their delivery way or way of doing things, that can be kind of threatening to them. And so if they're the source of the problem, that's going to be something you're going to have to kind of plan on and think about some sort of a strategy ahead of time to deal with that, some sort of a contingency plan. Okay, so we'll move on to this. Regulatory issues. A lot of times people will say, well, how come that problem hasn't been solved or changed? Well, in the end, they'll just find out it just wasn't legal what they were trying to do. And so that's a big risk. You could do a lot of work, put a lot of effort, come up with a lot of great ideas, and find out, wait, that's not legal somehow. There's some loophole or some weird thing there that we're not paying attention to that we're going to have to watch out for. So that's a big concern. And of course, we also have that the market dynamics. In the end, where most organizations are trying to put something out there and to consumers, in most cases, or some other type of customer that will use their product or service. And we don't know when those market dynamics will change and how they'll adjust the need for certain solutions within an organization. So all of these different things weigh heavy on the prospective project leader. So it moves us on to what you'll see in the book, in the chapter there on chapter 5. It talks about, starting on page 97, you're going to see two different approaches that people often use to assess risk. And I want to really highlight these as our major conversation in the coming forum. A quantitative approach that the book talks about, or analysis of some sort, it considers judgments that are thought to be mostly what we call objective, or in science, are rationalized basically by statistics or some sort of mathematical probability that says that the likelihood of this or this will occur. So if you're manufacturing a certain product and you find that you put that product, say a car or automobile or some other type of machine, together in a certain type of environment in a certain way after a certain repeated period of time, are different units produced, you're going to be able to study the quality of that and try to determine whether or not it's going to be something we can expect in the future to continue, or something that we need to fix. So quantitative is really anchored in that type of probability. It's going to look at things like what happened, when it happened, where it happened, and how many times it happened. So very definitive questions. What happened? When did it happen? Did it happen in 1976 on August 7th at 1:30 p.m. in the afternoon? Where was it? Was it in Kansas City, Missouri? Was it in a certain address in Kansas City, Missouri? A certain warehouse under certain environmental types of things? Was it cold? Was it hot? All of those different factors. We tend to want to know those things kind of in a black and white format, so we can sort of come up with some sort of a quantitative approach to compare with other occurrences, either in the past or what we might see down the road. But then we get a little bit even more in depth if we really want to do a good job, which is where I'm heading into the forum this week, which is what we have to talk about is what's called a qualitative approach. Now, the qualitative approach is considered more subjective, and when I say subjective, I mean that it tends to be influenced by individual human bias. Humans are emotional beings. We have the capability to be logical, and we have the capability to be emotional. The problem is we tend to go to one extreme to the other. We're either too logical sometimes, trying to be too objective per se, but we also can be subjective. But here's the hard part. That's the best part about us, that we can be both of those different things. If it wasn't for that, there'd be no need for machines. Who would be the consumers if we didn't have some sort of a subjective and objective being maybe to serve? So all sorts of science fiction movies made about that have been made about that particular thesis. So, but what we think about when we think in qualitative, we start to look for explanations that have to do with the how and the why something tends to happen. And that's more abstract. I mean, that tends to be something that comes from looking at patterns or analyzing patterns in the past of human behavior and try to determine how that might help us to predict future events. Okay, so qualitative, that's something that most organizations are not as familiar with because they're used to hearing about budgets and not missing certain deadlines and the cost financially to the organization. They're used to that stuff, but we're trying to get more abstract. We're trying to actually get more holistic, really, by looking at the qualitative side of things as well. So that's me to what we're going to do in our Week 2 forum. This is going to be our community goal for this week. We're going to try to determine, specific to talking about this qualitative stuff. You saw about a discussion of it about qualitatively and quantitatively looking at risk and trying to forecast risk to mitigate those risks. But one of those risks have to do with the type of people we recruit for our team. And I want to kind of blend that with some other chapters here in the book that talk about recruiting. And I want to try to help you come up with some sort of both a qualitative and quantitative exercise that relates to recruiting or staffing a project team. What questions you might specifically have to ask, or what type of information you'll have to find out to get a holistic grasp on how you should staff your team and what type of individuals you should look for. Very important. And so that's what our exercise is going to be about this week. When we go into the forum itself, you're going to see some additional assignment details. You're going to see the question restated that I just talked about in more depth. And I'm going to try to give you an instrument there within the forum that you can kind of use to kind of come up with some sort of ideas on how you can round out your inquiry by being both quantitative and qualitative. And that said, I'm here, Cary Valentine. Have a great week, and you're doing good, and we're moving along, and it's a fast class, but you're doing well, and I can't wait to hear what you have to say. Have a great week.